Well, good afternoon from London to all our many viewers around the world. And as the chairman of the British-Kazakh Society, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you all to this important BKS webinar focused on Central Asia and water, an external view. As you all probably know, the British-Kazakh Society aims to promote the very best of relations between the UK and Central Asia. And this mission includes highlighting key opportunities and promoting cooperation between government, finance, and industry. We place a strong emphasis on promoting understanding of international affairs, geopolitics, diplomacy, and indeed resource allocation. So this webinar falls squarely within our remit. Given Central Asia's key geopolitical importance, interaction and partnership around water resources are, in my view, critical. Water resource cooperation focused on resilience, energy, agriculture, mining, connectivity, environmental protection, aid, and security provides significant benefits for all parties. Water resource difficulties are creating serious environmental and indeed social impacts. And the Central Asia format for dialogue presents many opportunities and hopefully solutions to the water challenge. And this is a challenge which transcends state barriers and boundaries. We are especially grateful to His Majesty's ambassadors for Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan for gathering at this important BKS seminar. These speakers all have very special insights about the role and indeed influence of the Central Asia Partnership and water. So special thanks to Ekaterina for moderating, and of course to BKS Director David Skeels for organising this forum. And thank you also to Alijan, our BKS Membership Manager, for his key role. So thank you to you all, and let us proceed. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rupert, and good day, everyone. First, just the usual housekeeping items. The webinar will be video recorded and on the BKS website after the event. You can choose a language, channels at the base of your screen, English or Russian. And also note the Q&A feature at the base if you wish to offer your questions to the moderator and panel. So today's subject of water in Central Asia affects all of the countries one way or another. So today we're delighted to have a moderator who is very knowledgeable about and involved in the whole region. Ekaterina Miroshnik is currently Director, Head of Infrastructure Eurasia at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London. The team that she leads invests in transport, municipal and hospital infrastructure in Eurasia. With just under $1 billion in annual investments in her team, it provides deputy and equity financing for public, private, and PPP projects. Over to you, Ekaterina.
Yes, thank you, David. Good afternoon to everyone. Really a pleasure to be at this webinar today and to moderate it. So we have a star panelist with us today. We're very lucky to have 5 ambassadors from Central Asia. And I would like to introduce our panelists first before we move to the discussion. So we are very lucky to have with us Her Excellency Kathy Leach. Kathy, welcome. Kathy started her role as Her Majesty's Ambassador to Kazakhstan in August 2021. Previously, she was Deputy Director in the Constitution and Devolution Department of Europe Directorate in the FCDO. Kathy also served as Ambassador to Armenia. So we are also very lucky to have with us today Nick Bowler. Nick Bowler was appointed His Majesty's Ambassador to Kyrgyz Republic in June 2023. Nick, welcome. Previously, Nick served as the head of UK programs in Ukraine, and before that, as the team leader for governance and security in the Palestinian territories. We also have with us Her Excellency Katherine Smitton. Katherine was appointed just recently to Tajikistan. Congratulations as ambassador. Previously, she served as the deputy head of mission in Algeria. And before that, she held the position of deputy head of operations and programs in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia department at the FCDO. Our fourth ambassador today is His Excellency Stephen Conlon. Stephen is based in Ashgabat. He was appointed as ambassador to this country in May 2023. And previously, he served in Brussels, in the UK mission, and the UK delegation to NATO. He also served in Lithuania, Finland, and Sweden. And our fifth ambassador today is His Excellency Timothy Smart. Tim was appointed as ambassador to Uzbekistan in August 2023. Previously, he served as the head of Eastern Mediterranean Department, Europe Directorate at the FCDO. And before that, he held the position of Deputy Director of Cabinet Office of National Security Secretariat. So, dear Honourable Ambassadors, Your Excellencies, welcome to this panel. And today we would like to discuss the water situation in Central Asia. As you can see on this slide, and this slide has been prepared by the World Resources Institute, Central Asia is expected to be one of the regions which will suffer the highest water stress in the world by 2040. So, and that's basically the reason why we are here today and why we are discussing the water management and the water resources in Central Asia. This noticeable impact of climate change becomes more apparent, and support from multilateral development banks as the EBRD, which I represent, and also bilateral support from development partners as the UK, and as you, basically, Your Excellencies represent today, this support needs to be well coordinated to maximize our collective impact in the region. So how can we put the region's water use on a more sustainable path and safeguard this essential resource for the future? There are different views and concepts on this subject. Some initiatives might be disputed, given that not all projects might be mutually beneficial. Today, I suggest we put ourselves above the interests of different parties and groups and try to share our views and plans, keeping in mind the three fundamental pillars for efficient use of water in the region. So pillar number one, existence of well-functioning infrastructure, water infrastructure to provide efficient and reliable supply of water to end users. Pillar number two, transparent agreements between different water user groups to determine the proper trade-offs and synergies that maintain the integrity and sustainability of ecosystems. We all know how bad irrigation practices almost killed the Aral Sea. And pillar number three, effective regulation and cost-reflective tariffs. So minding these three pillars, how can Central Asian governments and their respective development partners ensure adequate water infrastructure provision, recognizing the enormous infrastructure gap, and we are talking, billions and billions here. This infrastructure gap exists in Central Asia. For example, we in the EBRD, we provide financing for the water sector, but we can only do from 5 to 10% of annual financing which is required. So we cover only 5 to 10% of needs. So the funding gap is huge. And of course, today we would like to hear from you, Your Excellencies, how you see the challenges and investment needs in the countries that you are based. And if you have any ideas, how we can all ensure adequate flows of sustainable financial resources into the sector. So first, I would like to ask Kathy Leach. Kathy, you're based in Astana, and of course, you've been in the country for several years. And this year, Kazakhstan suffered from severe floods. Could you please tell us more about the situation and also perhaps shed some light on the Kazakhstan National Infrastructure Plan everyone is talking about?
Great. I think I'm unmuted. Thanks, Ekaterina, and I'll set out some basic facts about Kazakhstan and where I think we are now politically on the issue of water, and then we'll look forward to questions. So, of course, in Kazakhstan, there are some of the common themes which Ekaterina, you've already mentioned are true for the whole of Central Asia. Firstly, I'd mentioned that much of the infrastructure is Soviet-era infrastructure, which is already past its useful life. And it desperately needs replacing. It's also incredibly inefficient, and this is at a time where the region is benefiting from a demographic boom, and towns are increasing rapidly in size. And the second, as we saw very graphically in your graph, is the climate change impact, and of which the Aral Sea disaster was a man-made impact, but the climate impacts on top of that, the shrinking of the glaciers, is already having an impact on water flows. So all of that boils down to a situation where all the countries are very water stressed, but they also need to look at how to solve their problems together. And so because again, none of them can solve their problems apart. They share water resources, particularly the two big rivers, the Sirdarya and the Amudarya. So it's incredibly important that joint action and institutional frameworks are created. But I'd say for Kazakhstan in particular, there are some added problems. And one is that it's a continent-sized country, bigger than Western Europe. And so it already relies on heroic-sized infrastructure. And just one example, the water pipe built in 1988 between Astrakhan in Russia and the Mangostar region. It's almost 2,000 kilometers long. It provides around 29 million cubic meters of water a year, and that means that it's about a third of the drinking water supply for the Mangostar and Datarau regions. Another structural problem in Kazakhstan is that rural areas are still very poorly served with water. And a World Bank study from some years ago said that of the rural population, that's about 50% of the population, only about a third has piped water. And only about 1 in 10 of the rural population have an indoor toilet. So again, it gives you an indication of, in rural areas with small villages, just again how basic water infrastructure still needs attention. And then, as you mentioned, Ekaterina, it's not just drought; it's also floods. And the early spring snowmelt this year, which caused devastating floods in southern Russia and in northwestern Kazakhstan. So I think the good news is that what's really clear over the last 3 years is that the government now absolutely is seized by the importance and urgency of the problem. And a few indications, the new Ministry of Water that was set up last September, a year ago, which has spent the last year gathering responsibility for all the different ways that water is used, and the kind of research base that you need to really understand what your groundwater resources are and what your water infrastructure is. And so they are now in the process of setting out their strategic plan, and that's fed into the National Infrastructure Plan, which you mentioned, which was published on the 16th of October. And I think that's the first stage, and then the next stage, as you also mentioned, is to then look at how to finance it, whether from budget revenues, from the National Oil Fund, from the multilateral development banks like EBRD, or by raising private finance. And there's also a recognition that they need to raise water tariffs in order to, where possible, make projects bankable. And so all of this is a really important first step. And that 16th of October infrastructure plan outlined altogether 204 priority projects across a range of different areas, from energy to transport to digital, as well as water. Collectively, it's around $82 billion worth of infrastructure, and this is just getting started. This is just the priority projects looking to 2029. So, and just to break down on the water side of it, out of 89 cities in Kazakhstan, 67 of them require either totally new construction or certainly modernization of wastewater treatment plants. So that's 67 wastewater treatment plants. 9 new dams need to be built by 2028 and 15 repaired. 250 water channels need to be reconstructed. That's 3,500 kilometers worth of water channels. They need to reach the 100% drinking water supply in towns and villages, and they need to do something about the wearing out of both water and sewage pipes, which is around between 40 and 50%. One concrete example of what can be done. And in fact, yesterday I was visiting the one privatized water utility in Kazakhstan in Shymkent, and over the last 15 years they have been a brilliant client of EBRD. They have taken out, I think, around $60 million in loans to modernize infrastructure. They now have used Polish technology to completely digitalize the water system in Shymkent, so they can tell where the pressure is around the city and immediately react to problems and leaks. They've used Chinese technology to put water meters on all buildings, so again they can charge people for what is being used. And since January they've been using British technology from a company called Bioran, which uses this sort of microbial technology to munch through sludge, reducing what was 100 tons a day of sludge, which then had to be put onto the waste polygon, to 20 tons every sort of week or 10 days. So it's a brilliant example of what kind of natural technology using microbiology can do. And all of this has, over the last 15 years, cut water use per capita in Shymkent to a quarter of what it used to be, down from over 400 litres a day to 120. It's reduced electricity use to about 20% of what it was. So really extraordinary results, and it shows what efficiency gains are there using the right technology. So I think I'll stop on that example, and very happy to go into more detail when my colleagues have spoken.
Yes, Kathy, thank you so much. And it's great that you brought up the Shymkent example. Indeed, it's a great client of ours, of the EBRD, and we've been working with them since 2008. And indeed, they're probably the best water company in Central Asia and maybe the whole region. So with this, I would like basically to ask Nick Bowler. So Nick, you're based in the Kyrgyz Republic in Bishkek, and many countries, including Kyrgyzstan, they adapted their water management systems to address the effects of climate change. Could you please provide some insights into UK's experience in tackling these challenges, and what technologies or practices might be relevant to Central Asia? Because I know that some of them are already in use in the Kyrgyz Republic.
Yes, thanks, Ekaterina. Hello, everyone. Hi from Bishkek, where very appropriately it has just started raining. So I want to talk about two areas related to water here in Kyrgyzstan that I think warrant particular attention at this moment. The first is energy, which I'll say a little bit on because it was the focus of the last webinar. All 5 Central Asian ambassadors from the UK joined. And the second is agriculture, which I'm going to dwell on a little bit longer. And then I'll talk about what the UK is doing and what I hope some of the people on this call might join us in doing more of and doing better. So on energy, the water is absolutely critical to Kyrgyzstan's energy mix. 86% of power comes from hydro, and in short, it really keeps the lights on. And it's one area where climate change, especially in a long-term perspective, gives great cause for concern, because if that water stops coming, or it stops coming in the way it should, at the flow rates it should, and in the ways it has done for a long time, in the ways people expect, then that's going to have a really big problem for Kyrgyzstan's energy generation capacity and indeed ambitions, which are huge, as the country wants to realize even more of its hydropower potential to meet energy deficits in the winter and create more of a surplus for export. But it's agriculture at the moment that really worries me the most, and where I think UK support as Team UK in the broadest sense, including in infrastructure as well as on policy and finance, is having already a very positive impact and helping the country rise to meet some very extraordinary challenges. And I put those challenges into 3 buckets in the time I have. One is supply, the second is climate change and the direct impact it's having, and the third is farming practices. which is inextricably linked to the first two, but does warrant its own attention also. So on supply, we know across the region, and certainly this is true in Kyrgyzstan, that irrigation canals are old, they're degrading, and they're losing a lot of water. I've heard statistics that the amount of water lost in transit to parts of Kyrgyzstan is as high as 40%. So in the context of a country in a region that's already under water power, that avoidable loss of water is a huge concern, and it's only going to get worse unless someone steps in to do something, which is a tantalizing hook for what I will come to when I talk about the UK's inputs. And the second is climate change. And we know this is affecting the region and the country very badly, and it's making the pressure on supply worse and making it more severe. And it's also affecting how farmers choose to farm their land. It's degrading the quality of soil, and it's causing farmers to turn to more intensive fertilizers and farming practices, which degrade the land even further. And indeed, that's the third challenge. The way that farming practices are changing and not evolving, I would say, is very important. And just today I was at a lunch with people working in the sector, and they were raising the alarm over the level of fertilizers that are being applied to the land, the way that's actually causing even more degradation to the soil quality, to its ability to transfer nutrients to plants and its ability to retain water, which is causing even more supply demand into farms. So we're in a really vicious cycle. So those are the things that are top of the list of actions that need to be addressed in Kyrgyzstan in water, particularly in relation to agriculture. And the UK is at the start of what I hope will be a very steep and rapid curve to do more to try and help address those problems, cutting across both the energy sector, which I'm happy to talk about more in Q&A, but in the interest of time I've left, and also the agricultural sector. And we're doing that from the very, very big mega infrastructure projects right down to literally the grassroots. So at the very big level, we are a supporter of Kyrgyzstan's ambition to realise and construct the Kambarata 1 mega dam. I'll note early that this is a regional project. It's based in Kyrgyzstan, but the benefits extend across the region. From the Kyrgyz perspective, once the dam is fully operational, it will meet the winter energy deficit and provide leftovers for export to South Asia and indeed the rest of the region to balance supply when that's necessary. But also crucially for this conversation, will have a very, very positive impact on water management in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So the UK, working mainly via the World Bank, is funding and bringing direct expertise to support things like feasibility studies, with a focus on making sure the ESG dimensions of the dam are really top class, and also doing what we can to try and bring more private finance at affordable rates into the project, alongside the contributions that have already been committed from IFIs, MDBs, and indeed the three governments who are involved in the project. So coming down a level and coming back to that problem of supply, via a brilliant British business called Concrete Canvas, based in Wales, the UK is helping to bring the latest and cutting edge technology to speed up, make cheaper and more environmentally friendly the rehabilitation of broken canals. So Concrete Canvas, in case anyone hasn't heard of it, is a synthetic alternative to traditional concrete. It looks like a mat, you roll it out, you spray it with water, and then it's as firm as concrete and as strong but more flexible. And it can make the process of rehabilitating irrigation canals much, much quicker. And that means we can solve this problem as soon as we possibly can collectively. And the Kyrgyz government has recently been deep in negotiations with Concrete Canvas over several exciting deals that we hope will bring the product not only to this country, but in a more sustainable and affordable way across the whole of the region. And then finally, coming down to the grassroots level, we're looking at what we can do to promote regenerative agricultural practices in farms. This is really a spectrum of farming practices that help to reduce water demand, to improve the quality of soil, and then as a result, deliver higher crop yields and more nutritious crops. So that's at the early stages of development, but personally, it's one of the things I'm most excited about, not least of all because it completes the full circle of areas where we ought to be intervening in and helping with. So my closing thought before Q&A is that really all of this works when we use what I would describe as the Team UK approach. And that's the public sector, including FCDO and embassies, the private sector, the people on this call, and Concrete Canvas being a great example, and other parts of the UK offer, such as universities, coming together to really work in mutually beneficial ways to get capital, technology, and exports and infrastructure on the ground in the country and the region. So I hope today someone is the next Concrete Canvas. If you think you are, please message me, because I would be delighted to hear from you and help you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Very exciting. And also it's interesting that you mentioned agriculture, irrigation. We also see in the EBRD lots of demand from the Kyrgyz government to support them financially with their irrigation infrastructure. And basically in our pipeline, these are the projects for the next year and for the years to come. So now I would like to bring in Katherine Smitton. Katherine, you are just arrived in Tajikistan. So how do you see the challenges in the water sector in this country? And what role do you see for international partners such as UK to support development of the reforms in the water sector in Central Asia, and maybe any specific areas where cooperation can be strengthened?
Great. Thank you, Ekaterina, and hello from Dushanbe on Constitution Day. It's the 30th anniversary of Tajikistan's constitution today. As you've mentioned, I've been in the country all of 10 days, so I can't claim to have the same level of expertise as some of my other colleagues, but I'd like to share a few initial reflections on the situation in Tajikistan with regard to water, focusing first a little bit on infrastructure, but then turning to some of the questions about water sources and sort of long-term water resources. So Ambassador Leach has highlighted some of the challenges around water infrastructure, which are relevant in Tajikistan as well as Kazakhstan. And indeed, the World Bank have assessed that only 55% of the population here have access to safely managed water supplies, which falls to just 25% in rural areas. So it's a huge area of focus of both the government and also international partners working with the government. The World Bank have estimated that around $800 million of investment are required in order to provide safe access to water for the entire population over the next 5 years, so by 2030. So that's sort of briefly the situation regarding the water infrastructure. In terms of water sources, unlike some other countries in the region, Tajikistan at the moment has abundant freshwater resources, thanks to its rivers, lakes and glaciers. However, climate change is posing an increasing threat to these sources and to glaciers in particular. Within Central Asia, the data shows that glaciers are currently at their peak volume, but according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 1/3 of the world's glaciers may disappear by the end of this century. And already in Tajikistan, over the last 30 years, more than 1,000 glaciers have vanished. This picture is repeated sort of more widely across the region. For example, in Uzbekistan, glaciers have shrunk nearly 30% in the past 10 years. And in Kyrgyzstan, over the past 70 years, slightly longer time frame, the area has decreased by around 16%. And this degradation of glaciers threatens water flows throughout the region, water flows that are already stressed, and we're sort of touching on the issues around those, and exacerbates existing challenges with consequences for sustainable development as well as energy and food security. So touching on some of the agriculture challenges that Nick also has, Ambassador Bola has also referred to. In the shorter term, we also see as increased quantities of frozen water thaw, there is a risk of flash flooding due to bursting ice lakes. So there's sort of multiple dimensions to the risk here. And as with the other challenges around water, the problems surrounding glaciers show the importance of regional cooperation on water security as a whole. So the region becomes more resilient to a changing climate. And I know some of my other colleagues are going to talk a bit more in detail about how the UK is supporting work in this area across the region. So I won't duplicate in the interest of time, but happy to come back to that in the questions. Of course, as in Kyrgyzstan, within Tajikistan, water is itself a valuable source of energy and potential driver of prosperity, with hydropower making up over 95% of the country's power generation. But at the moment, that in fact only taps into around 5% of the potential hydropower, the hydropower potential. And the International Energy Agency has estimated that if it's fully exploited, Tajikistan's water resources could power Central Asia 3 times over. So the sort of scale and the potential is huge. So it's perhaps then unsurprising that water in general and the preservation of glaciers in particular is a priority for the government here, who in January 2024, so this year, adopted a law on the protection of glaciers, which mandates the creation of a national roster of the glaciers of Tajikistan. And so while sort of at the headline level, overall implementation of nationally determined contribution, or NDC, obligations and reductions in emissions is essential in order to safeguard glaciers, there's also the possibility to take more targeted action, particularly around monitoring and observation of glaciers to help identify adaptation and mitigation strategies, bringing together local knowledge and scientific expertise to support timely actions against threats, risks and impacts. At the initiative of President Ramon, the United Nations has declared next year, 2025, the Year of Glaciers Preservation. And as part of this, Tajikistan will host an international conference on glaciers in May, which aims to raise awareness and sort of work with and engage governments, corporations and individuals to take urgent action concerning water resources and the preservation of glaciers from the melting and the disappearance that we're seeing at scale now. And this sort of process is important, obviously, not only for Tajikistan, but for the whole region. The UK stands ready to of course to support these efforts and to share expertise to ensure that the conference manages to move things forward and make progress on this issue. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Katherine. Indeed, it's recent that they will have this conference on glaciers in the next year, but Tajikistan is really famous in the region because, they usually hold this international conferences on water. So I remember every other years or every 2 years they have this conference, but now it's on glaciers as well. So basically great events, and I hope this one will also go well. So now I would like to move to Ambassador Stephen Conlon. So agricultural development in Turkmenistan is held back by high levels of soil salinity and acute shortages of fresh water. So Karakum Canal in Turkmenistan is one of the main sources of water for irrigation. Stephen, how do you see the situation being on the ground in Ashgabat, and what needs to be done in Turkmenistan on the water management side? How can this country survive the climate change?
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. And you're very right that water is a very scarce resource in Turkmenistan, and it's become scarcer. And it's not just an environmental issue, it also affects regional security, agriculture, you mentioned the migration. As you've mentioned, one of the main sources of water in Turkmenistan is the Amudarya River and the Karakum Canal, which was built in Soviet times, which is unfortunately showing its age. There's lots of leakages. It needs desilting because in the winter, when the glaciers in other countries melt and fill up the river, it then overflows and precious water is lost. And we're working with a major UK company on getting a contract to desilt those canals. And we're also working with, as Nick mentioned, concrete canvas as well, looking at the lining of those canals so there's water isn't lost. But as the World Bank has done studies that it could result in, that climate change could result in a 25% reduction in July and August in the Amudarya flow into Turkmenistan, which would have a severe impact on the cotton and wheat production here. Cotton obviously using a lot of water as well as wheat. And they're very keen to retain for their own production, wheat production. And we're looking at what we can do to help that, including looking at the improvement of the Karakum Canal, desilting it, looking at the water usage. Central Asian countries are among the top 10 water consumers in the world, and Turkmenistan actually is the highest out of all the Central Asian countries, despite 80% of the country being desert and only having very limited water. It almost uses all its water resources. 92% of it goes to agriculture, 5% to industry, and 3% to household needs. And we're seeing drinking water shortages in Turkmenabat and Turkmenabashi during the summer. And as Kathy suggested, that's caused by aging water pipes and the need to replace those. So what can the UK do? I see there's several opportunities there. One is investments in water treatment plants. Being a desert country, there's lots of sand and other material in the water that needs to be filtered out. And they opened one in Ashgabat in May this year, and they've got 5 more planned in the country. They're using German companies, PSE, KBS, to construct those. The US aid has provided a grant which allowed a water metering system to be installed in the canal, so they have better data. One of the things here is the lack of data in many places. So with that, the government will be able to better provide farmers with precise amount of water for optimal crop growth and for cities. Similarly, they're looking at desalination plants on the Caspian Sea. But unfortunately, the Caspian Sea, the water levels there are falling. So that may not be the best place to take water from. In general, water management, you go around the country, you quite often see dripping pipes. There's a wide use of hose pipes. And when I've talked about hose pipe bans in the UK, people have looked at me in astonishment. And I've had to explain what this means. And they've said, but we've seen so much rain in the UK. But there isn't that culture there. So there's businesses here are looking at things like water recycling. The UN have just recently installed in their place to recycle water so water isn't lost. They're also searching for new drinking water. Turkmen Geology is looking for potential drinking water sources. So there's significant opportunities there. And then on the Caspian Sea, there's also opportunities there because the harbour is silting up and the water level is dropping. So it means that ships are coming in at 1/3 of their capacity when they could be more heavily loaded. So it's causing a bottleneck with logistics. But I'll leave it there and allow other colleagues to speak. Thank you.
Yes, Stephen, thank you so much. So indeed, you mentioned desalination. So a number of countries, Turkmenistan, also Kazakhstan, and on the other side of the Caspian, Azerbaijan, are looking for these desalination plants. But another alternative is to save the water that already exists, right? And maybe invest more in the, in the current network. But thank you so much for this. And I would like to ask all the participants to use the chat function, the Q&A chat. There's also already some activity going on there. And thank you for our honorable ambassadors for participating and answering some of those questions. So, but please ask more questions in the Q&A chat. So now I would like to basically move to our 5th ambassador, to Timothy Smart from Uzbekistan. Tim, how can regional cooperation be improved? How can Uzbekistan participate in it? I can share some experience from other countries in Central Asia. We in the EBRD, we financed an irrigation project in the Kyrgyz Republic. And through that project, basically, we helped to save water that goes from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan. Great example of an irrigation project. I know that Uzbekistan is also considering similar ones. And also given basically a more wider political situation in the region, in the water sector, and also given some questions we already have. There's a question about Afghanistan and the Kosh-Tepe canal that the Afghan government is trying to build. So basically how it will affect Uzbekistan, are there any concerns? And also again, potential for future cooperation, regional cooperation.
Ekaterina, thank you so much, and to the rest of the panel, and for the invitation today. Look, great question. If I may begin by just a brief synopsis of the water context in Uzbekistan, look at some of the key reforms you're mentioning, and finally exactly address that point at a high level of the importance of regional cooperation. So as some of you will know, Uzbekistan has the largest population in the region, about 37 million, or 45 to 50% of Central Asia's population. It's doubly landlocked, with a land area approximately twice the size of the UK mainland. 20% of that is mountains, 70% is arid, semi-arid conditions, deserts, etc., and only 10% is heavily irrigated valleys. Of its water supply, only 18% originates within Uzbekistan. The rest comes from the river systems we spoke about, the Amudarya, Surdarya, originating in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Like all the countries in the region, water plays a vital role in agriculture, clean drinking water, industrial water use, public health, sanitation, tourism, environment, and biodiversity. However, like with many of the downstream countries, historically, much of the water usage has been driven by the agricultural demands, particularly cotton. Over 90% of water being used in agricultural production in Uzbekistan. And as others have mentioned, that Soviet era aging infrastructure behind has resulted in large amounts of water being lost, and it's getting worse through evaporation and also through inefficient water use by farmers for growing crops. On the plus side, since 2016, however, on the reform side, President Mizoy's reform agenda, we have witnessed a gradual and positive change in water usage. The key drivers of this are climate change projections, population growth, over 1 million new Uzbeks are born each year, increased industrial water use as the country liberalized its economy, and rapid growth of 5-6% a year, and higher GDP per capita. The need for greater efficiencies is clear. Not least, it's predicted that the water volumes of these two river systems, it might reduce by over 40% by the end of this century. And given that a large share of this water from these rivers comes to Uzbekistan, it's under increased pressure from partners in the region to improve its water use. And as you mentioned, Ekaterina, the Kosh-Tepe Canal in Afghanistan may have already resulted in up to 25% less water supply to the Amudarya. In any case, there needs to be agreement between the six countries in the basin system here. As such, it is to be commended that President Mizoy's government has initiated various important reforms, including on land tenure, promoting investments in water-saving technologies, and abandoning state control over the very water-intensive cotton production sector, and supporting water resilience through training of farmers, and lastly, for developing new land and water codes. At the same time, and in stark contrast to the Karimov era, Uzbekistan, and this comes back to your point, engages in active transboundary water energy cooperation, something which just wasn't properly happening before 2016. And this is to mitigate the risk of water shortages and to look for long-time sustainable solutions. And this includes Uzbekistan, with UK and other countries support, as Nick Bowler has mentioned, co-investing in the Kamerata hydropower 1 plant. On a further example where the UK is partnering, I'd like to highlight the Regional Climate, Energy and Water Security for Central Asia programme. This programme has a £19.5 million budget, has 2 components, and will last for 4 years. The first of which will support regional cooperation on water and energy security. This will be achieved through the UK's continuing funding of the World Bank Central Asia Water Energy Programme. The second component is designed as a flexible fund, and it will be implemented by GIZ and has 3 main components. By funding the CONNEX initiative, we are providing the governments in the region with access to leading expertise, negotiation expertise to support negotiations with large investors. Secondly, via bankable projects process, we've initiated a 3-year dialogue between the governments of Central Asia and international investors in order to increase foreign direct investment regionally. And lastly, through the same bankable projects process, we will support improved regenerative agricultural practices, such as restoring soil health and water savings, with a view to boosting climate resilience and food security in the region. This programme looks also to improve the nutritional content of food and to support regional biodiversity. In short, the UK government, with many international partners, stands ready to share our leading expertise, modern technologies, and latest standards, and with a view to looking to improve water resilience in the region, water usage, and to bring that vital private sector investment to help really make sure that the whole region, and my place in Uzbekistan, is properly climate resilient in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Tim, thank you. There are some questions in the chat, and while you are still on, I would like to ask you. So there's a question about climate refugees from Fergana Valley. Do you think there could be climate refugees in Uzbekistan? That's question number one. And question number two, whether the Uzbek government are doing something to save the Aral Sea, while the Kazakh government does trying to preserve water. So is there anything on the Uzbek side being done?
So look, on the issue of refugees from Fergana Valley, like absolutely, it's a key concern of policymakers here. It's a discussion that we have with the Uzbek government, indeed under the Universal Periodic Review, where we all raise the issue about refugee status in the country. It's something quite sensitive. It's something I know the Uzbek authorities are looking at, but it is clearly a political driver to do more. And to, the concern is that as climate worsens, that there will be potentially more refugees, and how working together now we can help ameliorate the likelihood of that. But it is a very real policy challenge, and one that we and others are working with the Uzbek government on. So what's the second question? Aral Sea.
Aral Sea, yes.
Yeah, so we're very supportive of the Aral Sea Trust Fund. I know Uzbek government and other Central Asian countries are planning on hosting an event COP in Baku on this, to look at what's worked, look at what hasn't worked. It's clearly a really, really iconic climate disaster which has happened there, and the lessons need to be learned. And we're looking at, we have some projects through the DAR initiative to support afforestation in the region, to work with local communities on health, to look at how to bring income and community generation projects to the region, to look at biodiversity protection. But it's difficult. We're working with international partners, particularly through the UN and the Uzbek government and partners, to see how we can help. But there's no easy solutions, given the sheer challenge of it's about 20% of its size before.
Thank you. I would like to ask all the ambassadors, we have this question about regional cooperation, so how they see it. So I would like to ask each of you, and maybe if you can answer like in 1 or 2 sentences, like very quick, within 1 minute, what do you think the priorities should be? And you have to choose one and explain why. Whether it's private sector investments, private sector participation, whether it's regional cooperation or innovations. So what is more important for your country and why? So maybe Stephen, you go first.
Thank you, Ekaterina. I think for Turkmenistan, it's the regional cooperation, because they're downstream from Afghanistan and others. And I think the Turkmen government have been very clear that there needs to be a discussion at a regional level on how much water is being taken out.
Thank you. Can we move to Kathy Leach? Kathy, from your side, so what's important?
Yeah, so regional cooperation is absolutely essential, and as some of my colleagues have said, the project that we're supporting, the new project this year, which aims to support World Bank and the efforts it's making to bring the countries together, including the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea, the Central Asian Initiative. That's one really important political level. For Kazakhstan specifically, I would say there are 3 things that are really important right now. One is measurement, actually being, putting in the technology to actually measure how much water is being abstracted from rivers, how much water is being used by agriculture. Until you measure things, you can't change things. So measurement, which leads to then hopefully efficiency, but clearly, since 80% of water is used on agriculture for the whole of the region, looking at efficient use of water in agriculture and which crops are suitable for growing in Central Asia, I think is the really big #1 priority.
Thank you, Kathy. Nick, what about you? What do you think is important? What's priority and why?
Look, for me, so this is an emergency. We need to do stuff that's going to deliver transformational impact at scale. So regional projects like Cambretta one are where I think the priority should be. We should get these countries working together to raise the finance, bring the projects online, and get them delivering impact as soon as we possibly can, because it would be foolhardy to do anything less.
And Cambretta, can UK contribute and how?
We're already doing quite a lot through providing expertise. And the project's got a long way to go until it starts, so we'll continue doing that, and we'll do what we can to try and attract more private finance too. So we cover most of the costs of the Kyrgyz Renewable Energy Forum in Vienna this June. That led to some really positive movement, and we'll be doing whatever else we can to get more finance in.
Okay, thank you. Katherine, over to you. What's important for you?
Yeah, thank you. So I think from the sort of longer term sustainability perspective, that question of regional cooperation, including when we're looking at glaciers, so sharing expertise and monitoring and measuring to have an idea of how the shrinking is going to affect long-term supply in the region, and then to take steps to address that, sort of drawing expertise across the region and beyond. I think within Tajikistan itself, I think there is also a question around investment, both in water infrastructure, but also in hydropower. And I think, so I think there's a short term and a long term answer to the question.
Of course, in Tajikistan, we are pleased to see this sort of efforts by the World Bank to bring in financing for Ragun. So let's see how it goes. Yes, Tim, you would like to?
Yes, look, very much agree with what my colleagues have just said. I'd just add that I think collectively sharing knowledge and with international partners on water resilience. So I like the big major projects where we can help assist and working with EBRD, but I also like that knowledge on water efficiency and usage in rural areas and urban areas, because so much of this is down to water loss as well. And much as Stephen was saying earlier in Ashgabat, actually proper use of water would actually help alleviate the problem massively. So making sure we can share that experience as a region, internationally, and being best practice would be an area I'd also focus on.
Okay, thank you so much. So we also have some questions about assistance on reforms in the water sector. I don't know whether any of the ambassadors can add something to this topic. Any institutional support, technical assistance?
I can take a look back to my first time in the country and reflect on the fact when DFID funded local level work on cross-border water management practices between Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. A big part of that was coming up with governance mechanisms at the local level to try and mitigate and manage disputes when they arose, and that had a very positive impact. I know others have picked up the baton since we stopped doing that work, and it will only be more important in making sure it continues to improve and be taken to scale.
Thank you. So there are some questions in the chat about some grants or some sort of support to the sector. I can say that in the EBRD, when we provide loans to finance water infrastructure, we do also try to find grants, in particular for low-income countries such as Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So we work with donors, including the British government. But these are project-specific and infrastructure-specific grants. So to support basically the policy change, we have some other MDBs, like for the World Bank, the ADB, who basically provide some budget support to the countries, and they may also provide some grant resources as well. Again, a question to the ambassadors, if there are any plans or to support with grants some changes in the agricultural policies, if any of you can have something to share on this subject. Mm-hmm. Maybe not at this stage. Okay, so I would like to quickly reflect on today's discussion. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to our panelists, to our honorable ambassadors, and all the participants for their valuable contributions to the discussion. So your insights and experiences have enriched the understanding of challenges and opportunities in the water management in the region. So we explored various topics throughout this webinar, and looking ahead, the future of water management in Central Asia is promising, but requires concerted efforts. Climate change, as we all agreed, poses a significant threat to Central Asia in particular, with potentially, this region to be under severe water stress in the coming years. Of course, important to support from various financial partners and development partners, such as United Kingdom, is crucial for the region, and we have to coordinate our efforts and maximize our collective impact, on water management in the region. So as we move forward, let us remember the importance of collaboration and innovation, and by far regional cooperation is critical for this region. So by working together, we can overcome the challenges and create a sustainable future for water management in Central Asia. On this note, I would like to pass the floor to David for final remarks.
Wonderful, Katia. Thank you so much. And I just one general comment today. It's very noticeable. We had such a large audience participation with the questions. We very rarely get so many questions. Obviously, the subject and the panel is of high interest. So, along with Katia and Rupert, I'd like, on behalf of the British-Kazakh Society, to thank all the parties involved. Alijan, behind the scenes, who's managed the webinar in Astana. Aida, interpreting in Almaty. And of course, all of the ambassadors, as well as Moderator, Ekaterina, Miroshnik, for all their great contributions. And just a very final word on BKS events and the BKS, which the Society offers a range of business-related webinars, including oil, gas and renewables, mining, agribusiness and others, as well as educational and cultural themes. I will just mention one week of event, which will be the January 20th, 2025 week, when we hold a Kazakhstan week in London. That includes a very special society annual dinner in the House of Lords in Parliament on January the 23rd, plus at least 4 additional in-person events with the British-Kazakh Society Law Group, and I shouldn't forget to mention the British-Kazakh Law Association. So please check out the website, British-Kazakh Society, and we do hope to see you at these events. Thank you all. Keep safe now. Take care. Bye.